Jake Paul shocked the world last night. And by the world, I mean a lot of people who are overly emotional, biased, and don't know a lot about fighting. It was not that shocking. I was not surprised. I picked Jake Paul to win this, and I said he would make it look easy, and it wouldn't even be close. But I'm not here to, gloat or say I told you so or anything like that, though I probably will devolve into that occasionally by accident. I apologize in advance. I don't really care about this fight. It was just fun. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't even mean that Jake Paul's a better fighter than Ben Askren or a better athlete. It doesn't mean that boxing's better than MMA, which is ridiculous that people have conflated boxing and MMA and related them in ways that they do not relate. It's way more interesting to me to talk about how invested people were in this, like it means a lot. The show was a joke. The event was a joke. You got Oscar De La Hoya asleep at the wheel, needless celebrity cameos, commentators that are blabbering about nothing, lots of musical acts that nobody cares about except for Justin Bieber. Oh my God, that guy's amazing. But other than that, just a bunch of stuff that nobody wanted to see. They spent a ton of money and none of it was on bringing you high caliber athletes performing at a high level. It was a joke. But the visceral, guttural, angry, emotional reactions that people had just from some nobody saying they thought Jake Paul was going to win based on my observations and experiences. They thought this fight meant something. They thought my opinion meant something. They thought their opinion meant something. They said terrible, awful, nasty things. That's what I want to explore. Why are we so invested in this? What is so important about this sort of thing that turns men mad? I do this because it's fun. This is my job and my hobby and my passion. I'm having fun. But some people lost their minds. So I don't care why Jake Paul beat Ben Askren. He beat Ben Askren because he's the better boxer, not the better fighter, athlete, or anything else. Nothing else happened. I want to explore, why are MMA fans just the worst? I think combat sports are sort of unique among sports in eliciting this reaction. People get super excited about football. And they say things like, we're going to the playoffs. Like some totally unathletic guy wearing another man's jersey, another man's name on him, is saying, we're going to the playoffs. No, you're not. A team that you like a lot is going to the playoffs. It's okay to like that, but you're not going to the playoffs. But combat sports is an individual sport. So maybe we feel more of an emotional connection. Because I can watch fights and become emotionally connected. It happens to me all the time. But I don't think other sports it's as bad for the average fan. People tend to have kind of crazy opinions. People will watch Olympics with grease stains on their belly and a beer and be like, oh, she didn't stick that landing on the flippy things, this flip stuff they do. But fighting is inexorably tied into us as humans, because fighting, and especially men, fighting is one of the two things that we think that we're just automatically going to be good at, whether or not we've had any training or experience. And I think this happens more in MMA because it sounds weird, and I haven't fully formed this idea, but I think the average layperson can identify more with an MMA fighter than a boxer. I think there's more different types of personalities in MMA. I think there's more different types of body types, even in the same weight class. I think there's so many different ways to win. There's wrestling involved, which speaks to our programming, the way that we think we should dominate another person. Wrestling's hardwired in there. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu would allow us to subdue someone without having to take a lot of damage. And when we are punching and kicking in MMA, generally not at the same volume as boxing. I think when people look at boxing, they look at it and they can see the number of punches. Even when you're good, you're getting punched a lot, right? In MMA, there's so many ways to win. I think guys can get away with tricking themselves into watching MMA and saying, yeah, I've never trained or anything, but I think if you gave me 6 months, my mentality, and all that stuff. Guys think that when they watch it. I think a lot of guys do. They look at it and they think that it has something to do with something they could do. It's just not. You don't know what you're looking at. And if you watched the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight and you were super invested in Ben Askren winning and you needed him to win, or you're mad, You can be hurt, like we all want, like everyone wants Jake Paul to get beat up, but like he's better at boxing than Ben, and probably better at boxing than you. And I think that's what makes people's blood boil. It hurts when someone needs to get beat up and you can't do it. You want someone to do it for you. But Ben was not the right guy, and that was evident from the beginning, and that's why they picked him. This whole thing was designed to whip you into a frenzy and get pay-per-view buys and then views and clicks for everyone else that was talking about it. It was just designed to make people crazy because it's a crazy situation. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. So now we've got this crappy finish to this crappy fight. I mean, it wasn't totally crappy. Jake Paul executed a game plan to perfection. Ben Askren did not. Jake Paul used the most appropriate game plan for that opponent in this ridiculous farce of a boxing match. Ben Askren did not. And if you're the type of person that can't see that that's what happened, you might also be the type of person that thinks this was a bad stoppage because you might not know what a person who's out on their feet and who's defeated looks like. I promise you, and anyone who's honest, yeah, maybe he could throw some wild stuff. If you've been around this stuff and you've seen it, Ben was done. He didn't take a dive. Ben wouldn't take a dive. The ref made an appropriate stoppage. I understand that you don't want that to be true, but that doesn't matter. Your feelings don't matter, particularly if you have no training, experience, or expertise in the field. But I'm not just going to pick on MMA fans, because maybe boxing fans are a little bit like that too. I don't know, because I don't really watch boxing. You know why? Because I'm not a boxer. I go to boxing classes, I do boxing rounds of sparring, but this brings me to why even if you're an MMA fighter, you might be confused about the difference between MMA and boxing. Just like hockey and figure skating, yeah, there's skates in both, yeah, there's punching in both. But what you're doing is not really that related to boxing. It might be confusing, and there's two reasons why. One, you have classes on your schedule at your gym that say boxing. Now, depending on who's teaching them and what context, that class should probably just say punching. But we call it boxing as shorthand, like, oh, we're just boxing that day. I think it's really funny when I see like MMA fighters that are never ever gonna box and they go to boxing class and then they put on boxing shoes and they put on the little diaper thing, you know? Why are you doing that if you wanna be an MMA fighter? Just go to punching class. Get better at punching and blocking punches and head movement and footwork in a punching context. But you're not boxing. It's not just punching that makes it boxing. There's a lot of rules to that sport that don't cross over, so therefore that informs the decisions as far as strategy and technique. How it's scored changes the style. That's why Muay Thai and kickboxing can look different depending, essentially the techniques are mostly the same, but what matters is what scores, so it informs the style. So you've got MMA gyms calling their punching classes boxing class. I totally get it. We do it here. We have a couple of boxing classes. Some of them are taught by our boxing coach. Like if you came and said, I want to be a boxer, I would tell you, you need to talk to Coach T. He's our boxing coach, and you go to his boxing classes where the context is boxing. I teach one of them. That class should just be called punching, but it just makes more sense to call it boxing because people know what that is and it doesn't sound so ridiculous. So it's not entirely your fault you're confused. But there's one other reason. Do you know what happens when boxers go to an MMA gym to spar? When they get the memo that the sparring is generally a lot lighter in MMA gyms, they'll go a lot lighter, and then it's not completely honest and true to a boxing context. They spar much harder in boxing. But even when MMA fighters go to a boxing gym, MMA fighters will start out light, and the boxers, especially if it's friendly sparring, like you guys know each other, or it's just a friendly meetup, it's a lot lighter. The intensity is not high. So that kind of confuses what would be working and what wouldn't be working. And then there is, in fact, and this is a small part of it, when a boxer stands in front of an MMA fighter, the MMA fighter doesn't move right, like you're not playing right. Like he's doing kind of weird things, but he's still able to like slip punches, roll punches, throw punches, move his feet. But it's just weird. It's just a different feeling. And very often, a lot of times, like when I've sparred with just a boxer, I would have some success early in the day that I wouldn't be having later in the day when he just like got comfortable and figured out that like, okay, he just has to make some small adjustments because I don't know what I'm doing. So it's not entirely our fault that us as either kickboxers or Muay Thai guys or MMA guys go into that world thinking that we should be better than we are. And it gets even murkier when if you're a particularly good fighter and an athletic dude and then you go do boxing and have some success. I know quite a few MMA fighters that have taken up boxing because it's actually, they had an affinity for it and they did well at it and all that. But when they train boxing, they're training boxing. And their boxing striking doesn't always look like their MMA striking. Sometimes there's some carryover, but it's just very, very different. And there's things in MMA that can prepare you for boxing, but it's not a one-for-one. It's like small. It's like if you're big and strong, you can be good at a sport, but you still have to learn that sport. Now, the last little tidbit for these overly emotional, Dunning-Kruger affected guys is they've said, yeah, but now he needs to fight a real boxer. Okay, if he wants to. I think he's just trying to like make you mad and make money, so I don't know that he has to do that. In fact, if he did that, that wouldn't make you mad. You'd probably find something to be mad about because you just hate Jake Paul. I think he just needs to keep winding you up. And then you think, this is one that boggles my mind. Oh, well, he needs to fight an MMA fighter in MMA. No, he doesn't. That'd be dumb. He would lose. But that's like sore loser stuff. That's like I whipped you on Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and you're like, yeah, come see me on Tekken. Like, bro, I don't play Tekken. You came over here and put your quarter in here. I'm sorry you lost. Move on with your life. But to bring this whole thing back to the main issue is I just wish people didn't get so emotionally invested in any of this. Like, it's not even real life. It's not even real combat. It's not even real combat sport. It's just a farce. It's just a game. It's just like a what if comic. You know, what if comics aren't canon? Like you don't need to get super invested in them. It's fun to think about and muse about, but then you move on. People said the most atrocious, awful things about me because I picked Jake Paul to win this. If I were a real scumbag, I would lord it over them and I would make some video like gloating about how I'm so right and you're so wrong. But I'm not so right. I just picked the right guy. I had some observations I made. I picked a guy. He won. Had he lost, those same people would have leapt all over me mercilessly like, this didn't age well. Eat your words, yada, yada. I'm like, yeah, okay, I was wrong. Okay. Moving on. Like, people pick wrong. Teams lose games. Fighters lose fights. Like, talking heads pick wrong. It's not that big a deal. Old Uncle Chael, who ducked and dodged me this whole time, his live stream was so funny. He was all in on Ben Askren. He even said he staked his reputation. And when you watch this thing, he was like, oh, Ben Askren's down. He might not be getting up. Ben Askren has been knocked out. Anyway, back to the UFC, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, because he's not super emotionally invested in it either. This is all fun. It's supposed to be fun. So I caution you, if you are the type that gets really like, you need to take stock of what you're getting upset about, man. You're talking about what I'm talking about what other men are doing, which is already like a little bit, right? And then you're talking about what other men are talking about. Just take stock. It's not that important. I want you to be happy and healthy. I don't want you to watch videos that don't make you happy. I don't want you to consume content that makes you upset. Just watch stuff that you like. Like if you don't like something, I don't want you to spend time on it. I don't want you to spend energy on it. I don't want you to spend key presses on it. Just be happy. I think one thing that sums it up nicely is that in the MMA community, in the MMA fandom, the term casual is an insult. Like if you take MMA casually, you are beneath someone who takes it very seriously. In the context of people that aren't the people doing it. Like the people just watching it, the people that are fans, the people that are interested in it. Casual is an insult. I think that's very telling. I am proudly a casual. And I do this stuff for a living. It's just a guy from YouTube. It's just a guy from YouTube. It's a YouTuber. I don't know what I'm talking about. It was fixed. I gotta stop.